Okay, so where are we at now? Let's get this all. Okay, so I'm still talking about the 11 principles for the postmodern school for revolutionaries. The 11 principles are going to come from the alternative forms of education. I've come up with a list. I thought it was just 10. I like a list of 10, but it's coming to be a list of 11 because self-education is one of the most important forms of education. So 10 alternatives, or 11 alternatives to education. The alternative vision, there's good qualities for each one of these alternative visions for school, and so in the postmodern school for revolutionaries, we're going to combine all the best ideas, right? Because in the great pool of ideas, the best ideas should prevail. No, we should not just go with somebody because we like that person and therefore we, quit siding with power. Principle over power. We believe in principles, we don't believe in power. And the principles is what? Doing to others, you do them to you. Care about each other, have a genuine interest in terms of actually listening, respecting one another. Teacher training school, oh my God. So the idea for teacher training school for so-called normal schools, they're normalizing fascism and totalitarian. That's all they're doing is they're saying classroom management is the only thing that they do, and they plot against the students for about 2.5 years with their classroom management plans. How are you going to oppress the students when you get there? Well, I've come up with the classroom management classes or plan. This is how I'm going to oppress them. And that's all they care about. But there's a big, huge opportunity that's completely blown because you have a classroom full of, soon-to-be teachers. So if I'm running a university, I'm running a normal school, which maybe I will one day, and I'm running a normal school, and in this normal school, I'm educating teachers to become teachers themselves. Well, there's several things. I want them to get the knowledge into their head, but at the same time, I want them to have successful careers. So the idea is for them to get the knowledge into their brain, but also to have good careers. So that way the $50,000 in the so-called education isn't being wasted. So since you have a classroom full of teachers, all you have to do is have them teach each other. Go back to the learning pyramid. I mean, Maslow's hierarchy was in 1943. The learning pyramid has been around for decades, and it just says that retention rates, when you teach others, you get 90%. The best way to learn to bike is to get on the bike and to start riding it. So if you're going to be a teacher, the best way to learn to be a teacher is to teach, okay? You learn to teach and then you go on. But because the oppressor and the autocratic dictator just wants to manipulate everybody, it's to the advantage of the oppressor to divide and conquer, and if anybody has an independent thought for their, kiss-ass brown nosers, to attack those who have independent thoughts. How dare you have an independent thought? How dare you think outside the box? No, I'm not just a blind, soulless automaton. I have a heartbeat, I have a soul, I have humanity, and when you make them blindly obedient, you destroy all that they are and all that they will be. They turn off, they just do as they're told. There's no, they don't think about the morality or the ethics of the order. They just execute the order blindly. Just do it. It's arbitrary authority. I don't even know who the person is. They walk into class, they don't even know who they are. They just blindly listen to everything that they say. Do you like this person? Did you vet this person out? But it doesn't even matter. But because I'm sitting next to them in class, there's horizontal violence that's happening. So have the teachers educate each other. My God, that's it's simple idea, simple enough, but it's revolutionary. Having teachers actually educating each other. So instead of, it's weird with the volunteer and the observation hours, because I know that these teachers hate when I get in their classroom because they could control the class okay, but then I get in there and I can't stand the oppression. They're yelling at the kids, I'm supposed to be on their side or whatever, but I don't like the oppression. I feel apprehension when I'm around, these fascist wicked devils, right? So these fascist wicked devils just want to get everybody manipulated and controlled, and that's not the way it needs to be. Teachers can respect each other. First of all, when you get the teachers to teach each other and respect each other, then you'll see a change in the school system. So in my normal school, the postmodern university for revolutionaries, normal school for the teacher training schools that they would have to go through in order to become a postmodern educator, at the school, this mythical school so far that I'm creating. I did apply actually for the JCPS was going to make like 3 innovative schools. So, Louisville has like the worst schools in all Kentucky, like 18 of them are failing. They keep on failing. They keep getting worse and worse and worse, and they don't understand why. And so they're going to turn them into military cadet academies. That's the idea. Well, clearly the problem is it's not oppressive enough, right? They need more rigor, more work. They just need to be piled on top of them, try to break them, right? You want to break. That's not educating. They become, you know, if anything, you're actually empowering people to a great degree without actually empowering them. They walk away thinking that they know a lot of, you know, have a lot of knowledge, but nobody's going to listen to them because you have to, you know, actually give information that people want to listen to. You have to convince them that this information is important when you talk to regular people out in the street. So you force these kids to learn all this, you know, so-called information. They know all this stuff, and then they can't relate to anybody because it makes no, you know, because they don't, they had to take the oppression, and then they want you to listen to it like the way they listen to it, just shut up and listen to what I have to say. Well, they don't have to do it. They're not working to be a teacher. So they don't have to go through these hoops. So just having a teacher training program where the teachers educate each other. So take any school. You could have educational psychology. You could bring in the special education courses. You could bring in middle school courses. You could bring in inclusion. You could bring in any class that was taught at the university I could have taught myself, okay? And that's another thing. You're sitting in class and you're like, man, I could be teaching this. And to get the horizontal violence from your classmates, from these, you know, kiss-ass brown-nosers, to get from the, you know, the dog slaves that are happy being house Negroes or house slaves, right? Which is rhetoric, but it's a Malcolm X terminology. There's field Negroes who says it's time to get free, and then there's the house Negroes that says why be free when we have it so good here. Master gives us the best food, best clothes. We're not slaves. He treats us like we're family. So there's those people who sit there attacking you, but if I was the one teaching, they would be kissing my butt. So, you know, what's the difference? How come when I'm sitting next to them, I'm nobody, but if I was in front of the class saying, do this and do that, then all of a sudden they're God, and we need to follow God and go along with everything that God tells us what to do. So if you had the teachers actually educating each other, you know, get any of these manuals, right? So here's lifespan development. This is just about like educational psychology, and it's just about the developmental stages that people have to go through. Get this textbook, and then have every one of the students, if you got 10 students that's going to be teachers, have them pick a chapter, and then they teach each chapter to the rest of the class. And then they will be assessed by how well the students actually learn each other. And make sure they respect each other, okay? When you're dividing and conquering, you know, Karen Dunnigan, they all started like crapping on my final presentation because she didn't like me. So it was clear she didn't like me. They would get in no trouble for, you know, criticizing and talking to me like I wasn't there. Oh, he don't even know. He's on this. When you say he, like I'm not even in the room, you know, that's rude. It's absolutely rude. And you're also talking above me, about me, in front of me. So that's a Karen Dunnigan's class when we could have been teaching each other. When we're teaching each other, we're learning more than any of the other ones, right? Well, according to the learning pyramid, right? You got it 90%. So we're learning, retaining everything that we teach. So we're learning what we're teaching very much so. We're educating the other students. We're respecting each other. So not only are you building up your knowledge base, but you're also building positive relationships. These oppressors don't know how to build positive relationships because they're the oppressors. In order to love you, they have to take away your freedom, which is essential for humanity. And so in order to love you, they have to steal your humanity. And, you know, everything else, your loves, your wishes, your ambitions, anything that you think that you know, believe or want to do, they have to steal that away from you so they can make you malleable and make you transparent and make you, you know, to where you can be manipulated easy. And when they manipulate easy, then they manipulate you for the rest of your life. So, you know, that's how I would run my normal school. There would be so many classes that they need to take: educational psychology, inclusion, special education, right? Basically all the same titles, foundations of education, right? So the sort of the constructivist worldviews, all these different educational theorists. I know probably about 30 to 40 to 50 educational theorists that could teach a class just about educational theorists. Because I'm actually reading the stuff, I'm actually taking the stuff that they're saying serious, and I'm doing my own independent work too. So I just keep building more and more of a knowledge base. But if anything, it's kind of making me more of a pariah, and it's kind of making me, because the more educated you are, the more likely you're going to question the authority. And they don't even want you to question the authority, let alone oppose it, which really I should be opposing it. So in my normal school, I would actually have folks teach each other. When the teacher training school, I want them to be teachers, so I would get them to teach each other, that they learn how to teach that way, and then I would teach them to respect each other, and they respect each other, you know, what they're teaching. So that's the idea, is for all of us to get to the same spot, for all of us to learn the textbook and all the knowledge that is being shared with us, and to respect each other. So that means we're networking, we're becoming friends. It's a fun and exciting place to learn. We're teaching, we're doing all the things that teachers are supposed to be doing, coming up with the lesson plans and making us stronger and backing each other up, instead of making it like Hunger Games or the Bell Curve, where we're, or Lord of the Flies, where we're just made to fight each other for the masses' love. That's Hunger Games, right? So, there's a bell curve. Some people are going to fail, some people are going to get A's. So basically, you have to do as I tell you to do, or else it's over. And it's ridiculous. So the teacher training school totally blows an opportunity. You have all these educated folks sitting in the classroom that could be talking to each other about, hey, here's a job here, here's a job here. They get a job, they can pull the other ones in there, and then we could have, we're the postmodern people. These are the postmodern university people. These are the postmodern university teachers. And the number one reason about whether or not your kid gets educated is the quality of the teacher. This is according to Obama, but which that doesn't mean it's wrong. They get their facts and information from some source, some resource, and Obama says the number one reason for the difference between a good teacher and a bad teacher, a failing school and a failing not failing. I also would tie like the failure of the student to the teacher too. I think that's a good idea. Have pay based upon whether or not they're actually doing their job. That's, of course, the teacher profession is the only job that doesn't do that. If I was to build a fence and I go out and I build a fence, but I don't even build a fence, I just go out there and just dig a ditch and walk away, well, I'm not going to get paid. But a teacher, they'll be crappy teachers. They don't actually teach or whatever. They'll walk away, take your money, and say, hey, I did my best. It was you. It was all you. You didn't do it. No, I was wanting to learn. I'm here to learn, but you didn't want to actually genuinely educate. So it's ridiculous. All teacher training schools. This is from the Prussian model. The whole idea of the education of the university system was sort of to, the elementary schools, reading, writing, arithmetic, to everybody, to get every person, even working class people, up to a basic level of understanding of reading and writing and math, so that they can operate and function in society. And then the high school was sort of more for your, your college-bound students. So you got your middle-class people, your doctors, your university people, your sort of your professional class, right? So doctors, lawyers, teachers, police officers, whatever. So there's sort of the middle class people there. Gear those, high school, get those people geared up to go to college, and then the college people are the ones that they're the masters of the universe, right? So there's only so many people that's going to be the intellectuals that kind of run society, and then there's going to be the middle class people that's going to do well enough in life. They'll get paid well enough, and as long as they're obedient to the state, then that's acceptable. And then you got the working class people that just do the dumb labor that nobody wants to do. And that's the reason why we are segregated the way we're segregated with the elementary, high school, university, graduate school classes. This is all about Jean-Jacques Rousseau and the 11 alternatives, the principles, and now I've already talked about Jean-Jacques Rousseau, how he got exiled and was persecuted because he had wrote the social contract, and he had wrote Emilia on education, and then they burned his books, they arrested him, and he had to run from Switzerland to France to Germany to England. They're burning his books all over, and the Netherlands. And then eventually he doesn't trust David Hume, which is a big philosopher that we learn about, and he could very much have been, part of the Genevans and the Paris enemies of Jean-Jacques Rousseau, who was trying to screw him over. But he could have had a pension, from King George III, which doesn't really he's a tyrant. So why would the tyrant, I don't know, maybe they respected the arts and science enough to where they could say, well, some of you all could be intellectuals, but the rest of them have to be, working class people, or to work in our factories, or to be cannon fodder for our, for our military. So that's Jean-Jacques Rousseau. He writes a book, and he's being persecuted. And then you have, that was in the 1700s. So you say, well, that's, that's 252 years ago exactly to the date. May 27th, 1762 is when Jean-Jacques Rousseau wrote Emilia and the Social Contract. So exactly 250 years to the day, this is when he would publish it. And then throughout the weeks, I think eventually like 2 weeks later, he has to flee and get out of France because of the things that he had written, and they just they burned his books, confiscated it, and then they put a warrant out for his arrest. So that was what Jean-Jacques Rousseau had to deal with, and it really devastated him, because really, all he's doing is saying, these ideas, and the fundamental idea is that the noble savage. That when man is born, they're born good and free, and we need to protect that goodness and that freedom of each person. So Francisco Ferrer y Guardia, he establishes a school, and then they murder him. Okay, so Francisco Ferrer y Guardia is a Spanish anarchist. He's the founder of the modern school. The first and most notable modern school in America was formed in New York City in 1911. Then later a community was founded around the school known as Ferrer Colony and Modern School. Emma Goldman, one of the most famous anarchists in America, actually showed lots of Francisco Ferrer y Guardia. She loved him and says that's ridiculous that he got murdered just because he wants to have a real education. So Francisco Ferrer y Guardia was a follower of the Spanish Republican leader Manuel Ruiz Zorrilla. Ferrer was exiled to Paris with his wife and children in 1885, divorcing in 1899. He remarried a wealthy Parisian teacher shortly thereafter. In 1901, he returned to Spain, opened the Escuela Moderna, aka the modern school, to teach middle-class children then radical social values. So in 1906, he was arrested on suspicion of involvement with Martel Moral's attack on King Alfonso the 13th and released uncharged over a year later. His school had failed and it was closed while he was incarcerated. Ronald Lee Smith, he had his leukemia regenerated while he was in jail, and then eventually that leukemia kills him. So they throw you in jail, they let you rot, and then eventually, they took Muhammad Ali out of his prime because he protested the Vietnam War, and thankfully he was able to get back in there, but they took him out of the prime of his life. How many more fights could he have won? How much more successful could he have won? But that's the thing. He was succeeding. He was doing well. So let's take, the number one heavyweight boxing champion of the entire world, take him out of his game. They couldn't actually beat him, with, actually doing boxing talents, so they had to beat him, politically. And they did. So his school failed and closed while he was incarcerated. Early in summer of 1908, after his release from jail, he wrote the story of the modern school. The work was entitled The Origins and Ideals of the Modern School, was translated in English by Joseph Maccabi and published by the Knickerbocker Press in 1913. So this man, he ends up dying, in Spain because he had opened up this school, the modern school. Now, what is so scary about this modern school? What is the modern school actually teaching them? Are they teaching them, like, horrible things? Is it like a madrasa? Is it just an indoctrination center to say that the Muslim religion is correct and all the Western education is just trying to taint, what it is, who you are, what you're trying to do, and put guns in the children's hands and to make them child soldiers? Is that what he's doing? Not even close. Not at all, okay? So let's follow the declaration of martial law in 1909 during the tragic week. So this is in 1909. This is 2014, so this is 105 years ago. So, Jean-Jacques Rousseau, 252 years ago, maybe things are so different 252 years ago, before the French Revolution had happened. So, maybe there was like a lot of oppression, a lot of, sort of religious indoctrination, and the state says, do as you're told, we need workers, we need soldiers. But is that true in America? In America in today's age, is that all we're teaching, to have blind obedient soldiers and blindly obedient worker bees? We don't have industries anymore. We got all the outsourcing, so we're not a factory-based nation anymore. So why are we learning all these tactics, which was effective in the modern or the industrial age, which has no? We're in a postmodern age right now. The internet has completely changed the game in every way. It was the Gutenberg print and press revolution times a million. Print and press allowed people to massively, disseminate information, but if you had a print and press and you had enough money in order to print, the material. So those who didn't have a printing press didn't have the capabilities. If you have the internet and a computer, then you could have the entire world hear what's going on. So in, let's see, 1909, during the tragic week, which I'm not sure what that is, but he was arrested and having been found guilty after a lengthy trial, executed by firing squad at the Montjuic Fortress in Barcelona on October 13th. So October 13th, 1909, Francisco Ferrer y Guardia was murdered, shot down like a dog. Why? They used him as a scapegoat and said that he was the agitator, the main agitator for, I think eventually becomes like a sort of a Spanish Revolution. But October 12th, 1909, one day before, actually, okay, so it's the same day, so it's either the 12th or the 13th. So in October of 1909, 105 years ago, so 105, there could have been somebody born in that time. Francisco Ferrer y Guardia was shot in the trenches of the Montjuic fortress at Barcelona. A military council found him guilty of being head of the insurrection, which had, a few months before, lit the flame of the civil war in the city and province. The clergy had openly petitioned the Spanish premier when Ferrer was arrested to look at the modern school and its founder for the source of the revolutionary feeling, and the premier had, instead of rebuking him, promised to do so. So when Francisco Ferrer y Guardia was arrested, the prosecution spent many weeks collecting evidence against him. Put him in jail, get all this evidence against him, right? Interview this person and that person, and granted a free pardon to several men who were implicated in the riot to testify against him. You was in the riot? Well, to testify against him, we'll let you go free. These 3 or 4 men were the only witnesses out of 50 who would have heard patiently in a civil court of justice, and even their testimony would at once have crumbled under cross-examination. But there were no cross-examination. No witnesses were brought before the court. 5 weeks were occupied in compiling an enormously lengthy indictment of Ferrer, Francisco Ferrer y Guardia. Then 24 hours were given to an inexperienced officer chosen at random to analyze it and then to prepare a defense. So the day before he has his trial, he was given a defense attorney, but they only had 1 day to prepare for it. And then since it's an officer of the court, how strong are they actually going to try to defend him? So evidence sent in Francisco Ferrer y Guardia's favor was confiscated by the police. The witnesses who could have disproved the case against him were kept in custody miles away from Barcelona, and documents which would have tended to show his innocence were refused to the defending officer against the brutal injustice of the proceedings. The military judges found Francisco Ferrer y Guardia guilty, and he was shot. Okay, so 5 weeks, the prosecution's gathering all this evidence. This person says he's guilty, this person says he's guilty, this person says he's guilty. They only had one, a crappy defender and whatever, then he was murdered, and that was it. So clearly it was a show trial, right? A show trial is just sort of like the Russian show trials. Stalin would say these guys are guilty, put all the evidence against them, and then kill them. So really it was a trial just to justify the execution. It wasn't a real trial. It wasn't like they was looking for the truth and for justice. They just wanted to get the conviction, and that's all they was looking for. So the modern school was founded in 1901 in Barcelona by free-thinking Francisco Ferrer y Guardia, and the state's stated goal was to educate the working class in a rational, secular, and non-coercive setting. And that's it. That is it, okay? So to educate the working class in a rational, secular, non-coercive setting. So no religious indoctrination, only reason and logic, which is all we have anyways. So we're using reason and logic, educate the working class people, and not be coercive. Don't say, do as I say, or else, you'll be off, but actually, learn what you want to learn. So, in practice, high tuition fees restricted attendance at the school to wealthier middle-class students. So it wasn't just the working class. It was basically the upper elite of the middle class. It was privately hoped that when the time was ripe for revolutionary action, these students would be motivated to lead the working classes. So, in a way, they're saying that these are going to be the talented 10th who's going to lead the working classes to the revolution that would eventually liberate everybody. The school closed in 1906 when he was in prison for a year, but they didn't charge him with anything. They kept him in prison for a year, and then eventually they released him. Short after, Francisco Ferrer y Guardia was executed for sedition. Sedition, right, is just bad words against the state. How dare you? The state could murder somebody, but if you say, hey, they murdered somebody and it was wrong, then that's sedition. They put him to death, and that's the reason that they put him to death. How dare you criticize the state? How dare you criticize? That's the biggest crime in the world. John Adams actually had an Alien and Sedition Act where it made it illegal to criticize the state. Eugene Debs goes to prison for 10 years because Woodrow Wilson, don't even get me started with Woodrow Wilson. He thought that The Birth of a Nation was brilliant work. He said it was like writing history with lightning, right? So he thought that the Civil War had ended, black people was taking over everything and making white people the slaves, and the great Ku Klux Klan came and saved everybody. That was The Birth of a Nation. That was, Woodrow Wilson said, well, unfortunately it's true, that's what happened. No, that is not what happened at all. Black people did get some power. South Carolina, they got the majority of the legislature, but most of the time they barely got into office. They had progressive measures when they got into office, but it was just about that before blacks had been inferior slaves and now they were equal, and white people just couldn't handle that. They needed to put them back in their place for them to make sense. So they passed the black codes, they passed some the Mississippi Plan showed that terrorism worked. When you use terrorism at the ballot box or right a week before the election, then people couldn't actually, they were scared to go vote. The same tactic was used against the Germans and Irish Catholics in Louisville and Cincinnati in 1855, which is 50 years actually before this had happened, right? This this is incredible, actually, how recently that Ferrer y Francisco, or Francisco Ferrer y Guardia, had actually been executed. Only 105 years ago, this Spanish anarchist was murdered. He was murdered because he wanted to have a non-coercive school that taught rational, logical principles and in a secular manner. So no religious indoctrination, no Christianity, no Muslim, no Buddhist, just strictly here's the science, here's the information, here's the history, and that's it. And that's exactly, you know, I will use all those principles for the postmodern school for revolutionaries. So Francisco Ferrer y Guardia, on the 1st of September 1909, the Spanish government, at the behest of the Catholic Church. So again, it was the Calvinist censors and the French Catholics that had persecuted Jean-Jacques Rousseau. So we saw the Catholic Church before. They had persecuted Jean-Jacques Rousseau. We saw the Catholic Church sitting there persecuting. They're the ones that's going to end up killing Francisco Ferrer y Guardia. But also the Spanish Inquisition, the Crusades, Mussolini, Hitler, the Russian czars. Catholic Church for about 1,000 years in Europe was one of the most bloody. They were the ones that was killing most of the people, was the Catholic Church. You know, the Spanish Inquisition was, if you're not a Catholic, we'll kill you. And that's what they did. They killed lots of people in Spain because they weren't Catholics. And now you see in 1909, they're doing the exact same thing. So they had a Spanish Inquisition, you know, in 1909. So at the behest of the Catholic Church, arrested Francisco Ferrer y Guardia. On the 13th of October, after a mock trial, he was placed in the ditch at Montjuich prison against the hideous wall of many sides, the hideous wall of many sides, and shot dead. So that's a great end, right? Just throw somebody in the ditch, pow pow, now they're dead. What was his crime? His crime was sedition, so it was speaking out against the state. When did the World War I happen? That's 1917. Eugene Debs goes to prison in America. He was supposed to go for 10 years. I think he got out like after 5 or so. One of the presidents eventually granted him a pardon, but then he died like really soon afterwards. But they had put him in prison because he spoke out against World War I. And why did we fight World War I? What was the reason? Like, ask any American, okay? Ask any Kentuckian, ask any American what World War I was about, and you won't get a good answer. You will not get a good answer, because there wasn't a good answer for why it was actually going on. Archduke Franz Ferdinand, he got assassinated, and that set off a chain of events where they're all fighting each other. But a part of it was the English Empire and the German Empire were vying for power, and America was siding with the English, even though the English were the original oppressors of America. So we keep on going into, you know, England's sort of the French Revolution. We declared neutrality. We didn't go with England on this, and England came back and burned down our White House. And then in World War I, we're still siding with England, right? We still have this, like, sort of this special relationship that we call today, right? That's how the English have learned to actually gain power, by holding on to an American president. So it's the American Empire is basically the English Empire, only in a different form. So America's carried out the imperialist the imperialist wishes, or the conquest, or the manifest destiny that England had once had, right? The British Empire, the sun never set on the British Empire. They had colonies all over the world at one point. And unfortunately, just like civilizations, empires die. So let's carry on. On the 1st of September 1909, the Spanish government, at the behest of the Catholic Church, arrested Francisco Ferrer y Guardia. The 13th of October, they shot him in the ditch, right? In a ditch at the Montjuich prison. Instantly, Ferrer, the obscure teacher, became a universal figure, blazing forth the indignation and wrath of the whole civilized world against the wanton murder. The killing of Francisco Ferrer was not the first crime committed by the Spanish government and the Catholic Church. The history of these institutions is one long stream of fire and blood. Still, they have not learned through experience, nor yet come to realize that every frail being slain by church and state grows into a mighty giant who will someday free humanity from their perilous hold. The Spanish were also the ones that sent Pizarro over here. They're the ones that also had who was the first white man in Kentucky? That was not Cortez. I think Cortez, he was Spanish. So you had Cortez, right? He murders all the Mayan, the Inca, or the Mexican, right? The Mayan Empire. So he wipes out the entire Mayan Empire. You had Pizarro, and then along with Pizarro was Hernando de Soto. So you had all these Spanish people that was murdering all the people in the Americas, and then they're bloody, just ruthless savages. They wiped out all the Mayan culture, including burning their books. So not even their ideas would carry on. when their agriculture was actually more advanced in Europe. They didn't even know about the potato. And then Ireland just picks up the potato, you know, because it was such a, it had so much nutrients, and it was able to, I don't know why they picked up the potato. They shouldn't have just picked up the one, evidently, but they picked up the potato, and the tomato and a lot of other things came from America. So, in any case, by the time Francisco Ferrer y Guardia reached 20, he had declared himself a Republican and anti-cleric, and he joined the Freemasons. And this is interesting. The Freemasons is a traditional haven for liberal thought and political conspiracy in Spain. So you had the monarchy, right, the rulers of the state, and then the Freemasons was actually the secret society that sort of was trying to get their own power. So it's weird how some of these secret societies can do revolutionary things. It was the Jesuits who had overthrew King James, or tried to do the gunpowder plot, which was Guy Fawkes, right? So even though they're, you know, you can't, I don't know, you can't just say, so you have to judge people by their actions and their behavior. So these are good things, okay? So the Freemasons are capable of doing good. The Jesuits are capable of doing things good. Now, the modern school. Francisco Ferrer y Guardia planned to establish a curriculum based on the natural sciences and moral rationalism. So science, technology, logic, reason. Yes, 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 yes. Postmodern school for the revolutionaries will have all these things. It will carry on Francisco Ferrer y Guardia's principles and then some. So we got 11 schools that we're going to take all the best ideas from, and we're going to create a new school on our own. I'm going to come back up, and I'm just going to stick with Francisco Ferrer y Guardia coming up. And then the 11 other schools, okay? So actually, I'll probably would just say the principal, or I don't know what I'm going to put, but the I'll make sure, if you just want to know the schools, that you'll click on the video straight where the school actually is. But this is all gearing up for that.